We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. I'm going to do something here that may be ill advised. I'm going to make this podcast also alive, but not on TikTok, on YouTube. Now, I don't have as many followers on YouTube as I do on TikTok. I gave nobody a heads up. I don't know that I have any moderators. I'm just going to go live on YouTube and see what the fuck happens. I don't know. I did one time a while back, and it was fine. We had a few people coming through and all that stuff, but I'm not sure what's going to happen in this case, but we will see if anybody shows up. Now, if nobody shows up, you may not hear this. I may go back, rethink this, and try something different. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Of course, the big news today, the big news today is that there was another attempt on the life of Donald Trump. It happened while he was golfing at Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach, Florida. He was out there doing whatever the hell he does, just golfing away. And apparently, the Secret Service was at a hole ahead of Donald Trump. They were a hole ahead, and they somehow saw rifle barrel come through the fence. They saw it poking out. There was an interchange or an exchange between the shooter and the Secret Service, and nobody was hit. But the shooter then ran to a car, got into a car, and took off. They caught him. They caught up with him. Um, and the guy's name is Ryan Ruth, I think. Ryan Wesley Ruth. And he's about 58 years old. He had an AK-47, which is a serious fucking gun, a serious gun. And they caught him. He's in custody right now. We don't know a lot about him. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, that's a libtard for sure. By the way, for those of you on YouTube, I know there's just a couple of you. I took a wild shot in the dark in doing a YouTube live. I normally do this on TikTok. Maybe I still will do it on TikTok. But we've got a few here on YouTube, and I want to see what happens. I don't have as many followers on YouTube as I do on TikTok, but I love YouTube, and I want to see who we can pull in. I gave nobody any heads up. I did this off the cuff, so nobody knew this was going to happen. Jazz Maniac says, "Hey, Boomer, he's got a long record." Yeah, the guy that took the shot, or didn't take the shot at Donald Trump, but took a shot at Secret Services, he does have a long record. Um, and people will want to say that, oh, he's a libtard. He's not. 2016, he voted for Donald Trump. And after 2016, he was then disappointed in Donald Trump's performance as president. So in 2020, he was looking to vote for Tulsi Gabbard. Now, I know you're going to say, well, she's a Democrat. Not really. She's not really a fucking Democrat. She's a Trump humper. She's the one that helped Donald Trump get ready for the last debate. So while she may have called herself a Democrat at that time, she not a Democrat. She might even be a Russian operative. So who the fuck knows? Um, but anyway, they catch him. We find out that in 2024, in this election, the person that he's looking, or people he's looking to support in this presidential election, are Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley. So this guy isn't a libtard. He is a goofball. He is a nutcase. It's really kind of crazy how this happens. Now I know some people are going out and saying that this is staged, and I don't think this one's staged. They caught it too early. Donald Trump wasn't in, well, I won't say he wasn't in imminent danger because the rifle barrel was peeking out of the fence, and the former president, was 300 to 500 feet away from the gun, which is well in range for that kind of gun, an AK-47. The thing about it is, the thing we have to remember is that violence begets violence. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. Every day of Donald Trump's life in the last couple of months, or the last couple of years for that matter, he's always alluded to the fact that there should be violence if he doesn't get his way. He's really hitting it very strong now. And it shouldn't be a surprise that Republicans are the ones that are looking to take out the former president. First of all, Democrats don't typically do that. They don't behave that way. So the fact that this was a Republican, that shouldn't be a surprise. Secondly, at this point, there are some Republicans out there that are looking at Donald Trump as essentially destroying their party. And that's true. That's exactly what he's done. He's taken a party that was viable for a time, and he's burning it to the ground. When this election is over and Donald Trump gets beat handily, then they're going to have to step back, rebuild, regroup, and reimagine who the fuck the Republican Party is. Some people think that they would stick with the MAGA gang, and I can't imagine. MAGA hasn't won shit since 2016. They continually lose elections. So why in the world would you continue to do that? Republicans are stupid, so I have to give you that. Now, at the site of this situation, they say U.S. Secret Service agents posted a few holes up from where Trump was playing. They noticed the muzzle of an AK-style rifle sticking through the shrubbery that lines the course roughly 300 to 400 yards away. I think I said feet. It's yards away. An agent fired, and the gunman dropped the rifle and fled to an SUV, leaving the firearm behind, along with 2 backpacks, a scope used for aiming, and a GoPro for some reason. The man was later taken in custody in a neighboring county. So we have yet another attempt. We still have about 2 months, 3 weeks left before the election. Donald Trump has really whipped things up in this country. There are people that are angry. There are people that are scared. And it's going to make things a little difficult henceforth. I know when I talk to the Democratic folks, they are very nervous at this point. They're upset and they're nervous at the prospect of Donald Trump winning the election and what might become of this country should that happen. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Donald Trump has little or no chance to win. It just doesn't make any sense. We can talk about the polls. We can talk about people being worried, but here's the facts. Donald Trump is absolutely the worst presidential candidate in the history of this country. He's done some egregious things to this country. He's got 34 felony charges. He's been found liable of sexually assaulting a woman and been accused by 26 more. Ichabod Deer says, I think he'll lose by 16 million. Ichabod, I think you got a good point there. I think it could be more than that, as Kimberly says. Joe Biden won by 7 million votes in the popular vote. You know, I realize we have to deal with the electoral college, but when you think about it, in 2020, the reason Joe Biden won more than anything wasn't the great love for Joe Biden. I think people love him now, but at that time they didn't see him as a great candidate because they thought he was too old, and maybe that was the case. The reason we got so many people voting in 2020 is because of the people who hate Donald Trump and are terrified at the prospect that he will be president. Here we are 4 years later. Do you think that hate has subsided at all? I don't think so. Do you think people are any less fearful? No, I would think people are more fearful, especially with all that's gone on. Then you throw in the fact that he overturned Roe v. Wade, the convictions, the sexual assaults, all this stuff piled on. That's who Donald Trump is. Now, on the other side of the coin, we have Kamala Harris, who may be one of the most qualified and the most popular presidential candidates in the history of this country. She was part of one of the most prolific and productive presidencies under Joe Biden. People love her. She's strong. She fights back. And this is exactly what people think we need to go against MAGA. So you got the best possible against the worst possible. Tell me how that's going to be close. We know that media has something to gain by making you believe that it's going to be close. And that is, it sucks you in to continue to watch the show, watch them do what they do in the media and keep you excited, keep you scared, and keep you engaged. That's how they make money. That's where their bread and butter is. There's nothing to gain for them to tell you the truth. If they said this is going to be a landslide, then you just sit back, not worry about watching it, and actually watch something that's legitimately entertaining. They want to keep your attention. Not to mention the fact that these polls, we don't know who these polls are owned by. Presumably, it's rich folks. And these rich folks own the polls, and they have agendas. And the agendas certainly aren't Democratic, they are Republican, because they want the tax cuts, they want all this shit. So we don't know the questions they asked, who they asked the questions of, and what they do with the data based on their agenda. There's a lot about these polls, some that have come out that we've known that were a little are right leaning and owned by people who have ulterior motives. So to trust a poll would be ridiculous. All right, I've got some questions here. It's a little slower going on YouTube than it is TikTok, but that's cool. At least I can keep up. Monica says, thanks, Boomer. Good to hear your voice on the subject. Chaos is the game and playing the victim. Hope it wears off with MAGA. He promotes fear. Vote blue. Do you think J.D. Vance will back out of his debate? First of all, I have always said I question whether, well, I said after or before Kamala Harris debated Donald Trump, I said this would probably be the last debate because I knew Kamala would beat the shit out of him. They would destroy him. And it looks like that is the case unless Donald Trump changes his mind or he was lying or something and he will come back. And that's distinctly possible. I can't imagine why Donald Trump would just want to get his ass kicked again because that's what would happen. And regarding J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, I think there's an excellent chance that he will either back out or the campaign will say, you don't do it. Because again, we have the same situation. We have J.D. Vance, maybe one of the most hated people in this country at this point, and it's not getting better for him, with Tim Walz, who may be one of the most popular people in this country. How do you think that's going to go? Yes, I know J.D. Vance has a Ivy League education and Tim Walz was a public school teacher, but all you have to do is look at him. Half the battle is getting the audience to like you, being able to be comfortable. J.D. Vance is not comfortable. He's socially awkward. Tim Walz is not. I hope they get to debate. If that's the case, it'll be in about 2 weeks, October 1st, and Tim Walz will certainly kick his ass. I mean, based on what J.D. Vance has been doing as of late, this doubling down of these immigrants eating pets in Ohio, it's really weird. It's been proven that it's not true. Donald Trump knows this, J.D. Vance knows this, and they still double down. This is what Donald Trump always does. He can never admit he's wrong. He can never admit he lost. And apparently J.D. Vance is among the same type of person, or he's just taking his orders from Donald Trump. He doubles down. He doubles down. We get the bomb threats, the threats against people's lives. We've got members of factions of clans roaming the street there. These immigrants are locking themselves down in their homes because they're terrified to come out. What in the actual fuck? How does that happen in the United States of America? It should not be happening in the United States of America. The fact that it is happening, and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and MAGA and Fox News are all perpetuating this. They want this violence. So then they're surprised when something like this happens to Donald Trump and somebody attempts to assassinate him again. Donald Trump has instilled a lot of fear and anger in people, and it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans too, noted by the fact that we're getting a lot of Republicans that are stepping away from Donald Trump and looking for other options. even some Republicans can't stomach this piece of shit. So, since Republicans are more likely to commit violence than the Democrats are, this should not be surprising. A teacher would be a wonderful asset in the White House. Yeah, I agree with you. I can relate to that on a personal level. My wife was a teacher, an elementary school teacher for 30 years. Now, the downside is when she talks to me, it's as if I'm a fourth grader. That said, maybe that's where my emotional level is at. So maybe I'm best served that way. Greatest toys ever made. Don't blame immigrants for immigration policy. Yeah, especially when these immigrants and these Haitian immigrants in Ohio are here under perfectly legal terms. They're actually helping out in this community, filling a void, an employment void where there was a shortage of workers. This was important to that area. So they're serving the greater good. They're there legally. And for these people to continually put them in jeopardy is absolutely ridiculous. And what was interesting, J.D. Vance just said earlier today when he was called out about these these claims of immigrants eating pets, for God's sake, he said that well, if President Trump, he calls him President Trump, I don't. If we have to make up stories to get the media to listen, well, we will do that. Motherfucker just came out and told you I'll lie if I have to get you to be scared or get you to believe something I'm trying to sell. And that really is the essence of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and the Republican Party. They've done it all along. They've told lies. They've talked about shit that just has no basis in fact. And because of that, they're just using it as scare tactics. It's very frustrating. Carolyn says, we need immigrants. Where I'm at, the farming community uses them significantly. I think a lot of farming communities use them significantly. I know here, even here in Minnesota, we have a lot of immigrants coming to work in with our farms, and they are essential. Florida's one having big trouble. They count on immigrants a lot, but now we got Ron DeSantis banishing them from the state, or at least chasing them out, having them go someplace else where they feel safe. That's a problem in Florida and some parts of this country. Immigrants are here, even if it's legally, they don't feel safe. And at the very bottom line, isn't that what our country should do? Take care of the people in the country and help them be safe. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Republicans think otherwise. If you happen to have brown skin, they want you gone, or they want you scared, or they want you injured. Kristen says, do today's events affect the election at all? No, I don't think so. How much did the last one go? And of course, Donnie got hit in the ear. No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a lot of love for Donald Trump, so nobody feels the sympathy. Ichabod Deer says Vermont has 2% unemployment. We have to import migrant labor to our largest ski mountain resort to do work. It's not that locals don't want the work, there's just not enough. Well, that's something we've been hearing about a lot as of late. We have a shortage of workers. I would think if we have a shortage of workers, the wealthy people, the corporations, would want to fix the employment situation. And if the way to do that is immigrants, why are you constantly fighting against having immigrants in here? Ghostbuster Slimer, everyone thinks it was staged by Trump. Who knows? You know, the first one, I thought it was staged. And then when I found out somebody died, I thought, well, that can't be. They wouldn't go to that extent just to stage something. And then I remembered that during COVID, after Donald Trump told us it was a hoax, 1 million people died. And he did it all to benefit himself. Is he afraid of collateral damage? I don't think he's afraid of collateral damage. It's still a conspiracy theory to think that that was set up or staged in the first attempt. But there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things unanswered. He's been very quiet about the doctor's report, seeing his ear, and all that kind of stuff. And now this one's interesting. These Secret Service were at a hole prior or after, ahead of where Donald Trump was. They see a rifle barrel come through the shrubs, and that's where it started. Now, if it were staged, you'd almost have to guarantee that the person who was set up to do this would get arrested. And this person who got arrested attempting to do what he was attempting to do, he's going to do some jail time, long jail time. That's why I wonder if it's possible that it was set up. The problem here, more than anything, is the fact that Donald Trump is involved. Even the craziest things could be true. You don't know to what extent Donald Trump would go. So you have to consider it. John Nielsen says, my mom's parents were from Scotland. I have a nephew who is partly Vietnamese. You know, we all have different parts of our history. I know my great grandfathers and grandmothers were from Sweden and Norway. They have some German ancestry. We all have different factions of foreign countries, people from foreign countries within us. The idea to be fearful of them is ridiculous. Some of the greatest minds in this country were immigrants. Albert Einstein was an immigrant. Henry Ford was an immigrant. You can go down a list. There were tons of immigrants that did great things in this country, are very valuable and important to this country. Why now do we have to have a different situation? Old Soul is here. Hey, Old Soul. I would have told you about this, Old Soul, but I just thought about it and I was trying to figure out how to do the podcast and I was getting lazy. So I said, I'm going to do a live and see what the fuck happens. I'm hoping to do something with Old Soul on here. She and I together on YouTube. I'm just now starting to figure out how I may be able to do that. As soon as I do, I'll get Old Soul, and there's some other folks that will be here. If you don't know who Old Soul is, you probably never listened to the Rational Boomer podcast. She's been on there a number of times, and she's a great guest. We have her on once a week, and truly amazing young woman. You've got to listen to those shows. Greatest toys ever made. We are all from a long line of immigrants, unless you happen to be a Native American. That's true. That's very true. And with the way this country becomes a melting pot, all of us, even Native Americans, maybe down the road, have mixtures of other folks in us. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not at all. But for whatever reason, the Republicans hate that bullshit. They dislike it immensely. If you're not an old white man, you're a danger to this country, which sounds weird coming from an old white man, but you know, what do you think? I'm 64 years old. I'm not thinking about me so much. I'll be good. I've got kids, I've got grandkids, and I want to make sure when I do leave here that it's better than when I got here. I was born in 1960s. The 1960s were a fucking mess. In many ways, the 1960s were worse than these times. Hard to believe, but it's true. In the 1960s, we had 4 major assassinations: JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X, and there were others as well. We had riots, we had protests, we had civil rights, women's rights, gay rights. We had people fighting against the war. It was chaotic for probably 8 to 10 years. So it was busy and scary then. I was too young to realize how scary it was, but we got through it. We came out the other side and things got better. And that's what's going to happen here too. I really sense that come November 5th, the election will happen. Kamala Harris will win by a large amount. And then things will start to brighten up. The important thing you have to understand is, though, once we win the election, and presuming we get the House and the Senate in the majority of the Democrats, that doesn't mean that we won and it's over. There's still a lot of fighting we have to do. We still will have to fight MAGA to a certain extent till they finally slither off under their rocks. We'll still have to push against the Democrats, who may get lazy once they've got power, to do what they've said they're going to do. The bottom line is this country is a democracy, and that doesn't mean you hand the keys to the country to a politician and hope against hope that they're going to do the job. Because 9 times out of 10, they aren't. They're going to get lazy or they'll be corrupted some way. That's why what we're doing now since Donald Trump was president and afterwards by being aware, being loud, and pushing back. This is something we should have done all along. The reason we are in this situation right now is because we were apathetic. We got lazy. We had other things to do. And we do have other things to do. We have lives to lead, families to deal with, jobs. It would be nice if we didn't have to be on top of everything with our government every day. But apparently, from what we've seen in the last 10 years, actually longer than that, we do. We have to stay engaged. We have to be aware, and we have to keep talking. Excuse me. Old Soul's talking to Carolyn says it's scary as heck now. I can only imagine how bad it was in the 60s. You're absolutely right, Old Soul. And I've been getting texts from Old Soul, and she is upset and nervous. Old Soul, when you hear her on the show, she seems like a very calm soul, very compassionate, and she is. But she's emotional too. She gets upset on some things and she gets angry about some things. And I'm glad of that. That's how you should be in this country. You should care. I tell you, there's something I hate worse than anything. When I talk to somebody and go, I don't listen to the news. It's all bad news. I don't want to hear about it. Well, you live in this country. You should know what's going on and you should voice your anger or your dismay when you see it. Perry Young says, known to be a schizophrenic and arrested before. Let's get that guy a gun. Yeah, well, that's an excellent point, Perry. This guy clearly has some mental issues. Almost anybody in this situation would have to. And because he has mental issues, the fact that he has access to a gun is absolutely ridiculous. And the reason he has access to a gun is because of people like Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and the Trump-a-fox. So let's give people more guns. It doesn't matter what your background is. True Seeker says it's a privilege to be an American and it's our duty to hold our elected officials accountable from local to national levels. True Seeker, you're absolutely right. And I wish more people understood that and I wish more people acted as such. John Nielsen says to Perry, indeed, it's insane how the reaction is always now is not the time. Yeah, that's the thing that Republicans will always say. It's not the time now. We've got to grieve over this situation. These motherfuckers have never grieved over any school shooting. They just saw this as a thorn in their side and they wanted to push it aside, divert, distract, whatever, so they didn't have to deal with it. They knew it was a tough question. The idea that they give everybody guns is absolutely ridiculous, and these mass shootings are an example of that. So that's when they don't want to talk about it. Old Soul says to Perry, I saw someone going over his record today. He's the poster child as why we need red flag laws. Absolutely. And I know the Republicans don't like the red flag laws. If you listened to the Rational Boomer podcast, I recently read an email by Old Soul, and she brought up why we need red flag laws, and it seems obvious. Of course, she's absolutely right. Carolyn says, in my neighborhood, a racist cop lived and he would start problems with most black kids and they were just walking home. It was awful. Yeah, we have a big problem with the police department. Not all police officers, of course, and maybe not even all police departments, but there is a race issue there. I live in Minnesota, so we had the George Floyd thing here. We watched it on video as a white cop murdered a black man. There is a problem with it. Now, a lot of Democrats after George Floyd said, we've got to defund the police, and I disagree. First of all, that was a politically dumb statement to say. We don't need to defund the police. We need the police. I think we need to clean up and make police departments better. I think we need to pay police officers more and expect more out of them and hold them accountable. Give them more training, both physically and emotionally, and hold them accountable for the things they do. The problem is we have a very strong union in police departments. You've got people that commit crimes or even corrupt, and because of those unions, they get to stay in the job. That can't be anymore. One bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch, but it sure can do some fucking damage, as we found out. Perry says, I'm sorry to the Haitian community and all the people of color everywhere. Carolyn says, but something needs to be done. And I agree, Mike. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very sorry for these Haitian folks. They have done absolutely nothing wrong. Some woman made a ridiculous um, statement on Facebook that wasn't true. She admitted to it. And then, of course, we get dumb fucks like Donald Trump to blow it up and make it a big deal. If there's any question whether or not Donald Trump puts people in danger, this is a perfect example. We know he does it to judges, prosecutors, witnesses, jurors, daughters of judges, election workers like down in Georgia. They do this every time. And this is what's frustrating to me. They keep doing it over and over and over again. And our judicial system just pussyfoots around and they'll say, well, he's running for president, so we've got to be careful. No, the rest of the world's got to be careful because you guys are pussy ass bitches that won't do the job and hold people accountable. They keep telling us that no one's above the law, and then they keep showing us, well, yeah, there are some people above the law, like sitting presidents, like presidential candidates, like some members of Congress. There are plenty of people above the law at this point, and that's got to change. And don't keep trying to tell us that that's not true because it fucking is. Greatest toys ever made. The Democratic Party needs to return to being the party of FDR, and they would rarely lose an election. Neoliberalism has given us fascism. Yeah, you make a good point, and the point here is this: we need to win the election, get the Democrats in power. Then you need to get things done for the middle class. A lot of good things help to improve the country, help to improve things for the people. If you simply do that, you're going to be hard pressed to lose an election ever again. We've got the Republicans continually giving tax breaks to wealthy people who don't need the money and ignoring the middle class. Well, Joe Biden opened Pandora's box, didn't he? He did some things for the middle class, and what did it do? It improved the economy. It made things easier for people. So all this time when they tell us we can't afford to do things for the middle class, we found out now that, well, that's absolute bullshit. Worst of all, we know now. So we've got to be smart enough to press that issue. Vernon Sloan says these gun owners need to see what a child looks like after being gunned down. A pound of hamburger looks better. So sad. Vernon, you make a good point. It's one thing if someone is shot by a handgun or something like that. But when you're talking about AR-15s or AK type rifles, it's absolutely appalling the damage it does. There is no reason in the world that individuals need to own AR-15s or AK-47s or anything like that. They're very powerful. They're not useful for hunting. It's just about somebody's little fucking ego or small penis, and they've got to do something to compensate. Simon says, thank you, Boomer. I appreciate all the information you provide. Thank you very much. Kimberly Soderman, taking pictures with guns. Yeah, that's the funny thing. The Republicans will come out there. They've got the pins of the AR-15s, or they take pictures with their family and guns. This is all an attempt to own the libtards, to try to rile us up. I don't give a fuck what you take your Christmas pictures with. You look like dumbasses, and I will call you out as such. These people are some of the most despicable people you'll ever find. Perry Young says he's delaying prison, period, and he shouldn't be allowed to run. I agree on both cases. Now, here's the thing you got to understand. He has delayed a lot. He's trying to delay it past the election because somehow in his delusional mind, he thinks that he'll get elected president and he'll be able to make all this stuff go away. Well, there's no way he's going to win. And the fact that he's delayed it after the election, he's going to live to regret that. Because when these trials start after the election or the sentencing after the election, he's going to be completely vulnerable. He won't have the protection of being a candidate. He won't have the protection of being the president. At that point, the Republicans will be absolutely exhausted from him losing election after election after election. There's really no value to the Republican anymore with Donald Trump. So he's going to be an island on his own. He's going to be sentenced. I think the fact that they pushed the sentencing in the Manhattan district trial to after the election gives us a little hint that maybe jail in this first set of convictions is in the offing. Perry Young says, I can't believe he's eroded our norms to this extent. Absolutely. I always heard about norms. Well, not really a law, but there's some norms. No one would ever do that. Well, Donald Trump never saw a norm he didn't walk over the top of. And now that he has, and has essentially been able to get away with it, that means those norms have no value anymore. Next time we get somebody as ridiculous and despicable as Donald Trump, they won't think twice about jumping over those norms because they've seen what happens. You get to delay. As long as you're president, you're not accountable for these things. So now we've got to shore up the laws. We've got to actually make everybody accountable to the law, put nobody above the law. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, even if the Democrats win. If the Democrats win in November, on November 5th, we've got a lot of work yet to go. What do you think they call it? Red mist. Yeah, exactly. Talking about being shot by an AR or AK type of gun. Old Soul says, with all these fanning of flames, Trump will be lucky he makes it to November, let alone be around to face sentencing. I've said that all along. There was a time when I questioned whether or not Donald Trump would make it to the November election. Either he'd drop out or get sick or keel over or something. But I'm going to tell you right now, I hope that doesn't happen. We need Donald Trump to make it to the election. We need him to make it to the election and get his ass whooped. We need the Democrats to whip Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. We need them to whip the Republicans in the House and Senate. That is the only way we're going to get closure and any change in this country. That's what it's going to take to get the Republicans to step back and say, hey, this isn't fucking working. We've got to do something different. So we need him to run. We need him to get absolutely destroyed in the election. And then if he wants to keel over, God rest his soul. Perry says we have to end dark money. Yeah, we have to end money in political campaigns altogether. Now, this is one of the times it's going to work in the favor of the Democrats. I'm not even necessarily talking dark money. It's not dark money with Kamala, but she's got more money than Donald Trump. And when you have more money, that makes it more likely that you will win. Last month, Kamala raised 3 times as much as Donald Trump, and that says something. KGO 9114 AK-47 is no joke. It's ridiculous that someone has that type of weapon walking around. I'm sick of all this nonsense and the hateful crap. Obi-Mom Kenobi, I agree. We need to vote the whole bunch of them out of office. Yeah. It's kind of like having an operation for cancer. We need to eradicate every little bit because even one could metastasize and grow into something bigger. Maybe not till well after I'm dead, but we need to clean it out, get all of it, eradicate it, and put this hateful group of people down for good. We have to absolutely do this. Stormy Rose Butterflies. Hello, Mike. Glad the mango Mussolini is okay. Actually, I am too. I'm not ready for the upheaval and the craziness that would happen if Donald Trump were actually hit and killed. I don't want to see that. That's not beneficial to anybody, and we don't want to see anybody get shot. Donald Trump is deserving of punishment, and that kind of punishment wouldn't be enough. He needs to spend the next several years going through the life he's going to have. He's going to be on trial. He's going to go to jail. Now, people will say he'll never go to jail. That's bullshit. He may go to jail for the Manhattan District thing. We're still waiting to see that. But when we're talking about stealing classified documents, inciting a riot and a takeover of the country, those will call for jail sentences, especially when he's already got multiple convictions going into those cases. he will go to jail. The only opportunity he has to avoid it is if he wins in November. And I see no way he's winning in November. It just doesn't make sense. He didn't win in 2020, and he's a worse candidate right now. He's got bigger problems now. It's just not going to happen. The media will want to tell you, oh, it's close. It's a toss up. It's not. It's just not. All the other factors besides the polls tell you otherwise. They're trying to scare you. They're trying to suck you in so that you watch what they're selling, and it's all about money. KGO says, I'm glad no one was hurt, but I continue to fear for Harris, Walz, and Trump. Vance safety, 45, and his running mate keep spewing lies and hate. Obi-Mom Kenobi, do they have a motive for this potential shooter? I'm late to the live. Well, I don't know that they've come out with a motive per se, but we know a little bit about this guy. We know that in 2016, this guy voted for Donald Trump. In 2020, he was disappointed in Donald Trump, and that's a common thing with Donald Trump, mostly with his wives. But he was disappointed in him, and he decided to vote for Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi Gabbard, of course, at the time was a Democrat, but we know she wasn't really a Democrat. And now she works for the Trump campaign. She helped him get ready for the debate, and what a good job she did, huh? Then he liked Tulsi Gabbard, but in 2024, he was a big Vivek Ramaswamy guy. That shows you how goofy that fuck is. But he liked Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley and wanted them to be the team to go up against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. 2019, 2020, he donated to Act Blue 19 times. Don't even know what Act Blue is. Presumably that's a Democratic cause. The bottom line is this guy was nuts. To do something like this, you have to be psychologically off. And I think the record shows that's the case. He's obviously a confused guy. I don't know that they verified that he was a shooter, but they presume he was. Karen Dinsdale says the DOJ should have grown a spine 4 years ago and jailed the traitor. Yeah, particularly Merrick Garland. One of the things Kamala Harris has to do when she gets elected is fire Merrick Garland. I'm sure he's a great jurist. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he doesn't have the mentality to be an attorney general, especially in a time when people are committing egregious crimes. The reason Donald Trump is still loose and still not sentenced is because of Merrick Garland. It took him 2 years, more than 2 years, to get Jack Smith on board to go after Donald Trump. Had he done it right away when he took office, we'd already be done with this shit. We'd be through it. Kelly Downing says, the one that looks like Jigsaw from the Saw movies. Yeah, we've been talking about that a lot. We've been talking about Laura Loomer, Donald Trump's new buddy. It amazes me. It's an interesting story about Laura Loomer. She is basically an internet troll. She's tried to run for office a couple of times, failed miserably. She's done some crazy, goofy shit. She said some horrific shit. You know, she was talking about if Kamala Harris got into the White House, it'd smell like curry. It's not even clever. It's racist and it's bullshit. So now this is Donald Trump's buddy. What's interesting is he wanted to pull her into the campaign sometime back. And the people around him in the campaign knew what the fucking problem she would be. And they said, no, 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 you can't, you can't. Yet now she's in. She's on the plane with him when he's flying from campaign speech to campaign speech. Why is that? If the people around him didn't want her around, why is she now there? Well, because Donald Trump is hearing that he's losing. He's hearing the things he doesn't want to hear. And the people around him, he's not listening to them anymore. He says, fuck it. If you can't do the job, if you can't make me win, I don't want to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to bring somebody on board that will tell me what I want to hear. No matter how crazy it is, I'm going to have somebody tell me what I want to hear. And that's going to be my go-to. And that's why Laura Loomer is there. Now, what's interesting, he's doing what he typically does. He's getting some pushback about the crazy shit she's saying. And now Donald Trump has said she's a great woman. She's got a lot of energy. She loves him. She loves the campaign. But now that he's getting pushback, he's saying, well, I don't really know her that well, and I don't believe all the things she says. Yeah, we've heard that before about Project 2025. He was all in for a number of years, and now he doesn't know anything about it. And now he doesn't know that much about Laura Loomer, which is absolute bullshit. Somebody brought something up. Somebody on TikTok brought something up that I find very interesting. Very interesting. And that is that she kind of reminds a lot of people of that crazy girlfriend or that crazy boyfriend that you might maybe once had. Clearly, there seems to be something more than just a an employee with Donald Trump. He seems fairly close with her, and I'm sure it's her goal to get as close as she can. She's a fucking nobody. She's not very smart, and she's crazy. But think about this. Think about what happens when you've got a crazy girlfriend or a crazy boyfriend. And then things fall apart as they do with crazy people, and they get angry. Oh, the shit starts to fly. The tea gets spilled, and there's going to be a fucking mess. Now, a lot of people won't tell on Donald Trump because they're afraid to tell on Donald Trump. That's typically not the problem with a crazy person. They'll burn every bridge, scorch every acre of earth, and they will take somebody down. And that's why I think this woman will ultimately take Donald Trump down. And you're probably saying, well, what could she get mad about? Well, Donald Trump just said, I don't know her and I don't agree with her. That's enough to get a crazy person talking some shit. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. Will Rodriguez said, not one comment from Garland on the Springfield situation. Not surprising. Merrick Garland is a gutless piece of shit. Like I said, he might be a good guy. He ain't no attorney general. He's not a good one. Um, Perry Young says Laura Looney clowns that smudge together the roar of the grease paint and the smell of the crowd. Yeah. Yeah, she looks freaky. She looks like an evil or more evil Cruella DeVille kind of thing. Old Soul says, I think she's his mouthpiece. He's using her to say things he can't say in public. The problem is, even with a mouthpiece, they still can't shut up. And I think Old Soul is right on target there. Um, his people tell him he shouldn't say certain things, and he's trying to comply, but he still wants those things said. So it's much easier to say, well, she said it. I didn't say it, but keep saying it. And the thing about it is, when she says this shit, he retruths it or retweets it as if he's supporting it. So while he didn't say it, um, he is sending it out from his particular social media, which is basically agreeing with what is said. Donald Trump is so dumb. Um, when Trump loses, he'll have the audacity to run again, 84 years old. If he's not in prison, vote blue 2024, 2029, 2032. Look, Donald Trump is 78 years old. He's got 3 trials, of which he's going to get convicted of all of them. He's going to be in jail. But I think more importantly than that, you look at this guy. He's not healthy. He's got a lot of problems. He's going to be out of money. Donald Trump doesn't survive till 2028. It's just not going to fucking happen. It's Donald Trump is done after November 5th. Anything he could ever hope for, any Hail Mary pass he thinks he can throw, it's done. That's the wonderful thing as we sit here. We've dealt with Donald Trump over an endless period of time, or so it seemed. Well, that time has an end, November 5th. People will say, well, he'll say he didn't lose, that it was rigged and all that stuff. Yeah, he'll say that. It didn't work in 2020, and he's a lot weaker candidate now and in a lot weaker position. People with close to average intelligence will say, fucking enough's enough. I'm not going to keep riding this horse that keeps losing. And Donald Trump will lose a lot. Um, True Seeker says, y'all don't forget to like this live. Yeah, feel free to like it if you want. Um, I will tell the people in the live too that I'm recording it. And this will also be the Rational Boomer podcast. So if you didn't get all of the live or whatever, this is my lazy way to kill two birds with one stone. Do the live on YouTube, which I haven't done a lot of lately, and record a podcast. So if you're on YouTube and you're not familiar with the Rational Boomer podcast, I would encourage you to look for it. Um, there's an audio version on Spotify, and there's a video version here on YouTube. We get a lot of guests on, got a lot of listeners that are guests, great souls. Old Soul is one of them. There's some other folks out there that that are on the Rational Boomer podcast. And why it's important, since I started this, it's important that people get the truth, get the facts, understand what's going on. And you can't always tell it in those short things we have here on YouTube or on TikTok. So with the Rational Boomer podcast, we get to expand on it a little bit, talk about it more in depth so that you're better informed and don't feel so helpless and concerned and scared. I mean, that's the one thing we try to do with Rational Boomer stuff is try to take away some fear, let them understand what the truth and the facts are, and give them some sense of hope. And, we've had some success doing that. So check out the Rational Boomer podcast. Benny Loco, finally, I couldn't make the chat work. Howdy, Boomer, chat land. Hey, Benny Loco, thank you. Benny Loco makes a lot of comments on my videos, and I appreciate it immensely. I want to tell folks too, whether they be on TikTok or YouTube or whatever social media platform, I don't always get a chance to respond to the comments. And it's not that I'm trying to ignore you. It's because I get a lot of comments on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. And if I answered all the comments, I wouldn't have time to do the TikToks and the podcast. So I apologize. I do read as much of it as I can, and I appreciate the effort. And I think it's really more a great opportunity for listeners to interact. And I've said this before about the podcast and about the TikToks. This isn't all about me pontificating and preaching whatever I believe, because I have guests on the podcast frequently that I learn from a lot. I learn a lot from them. And it's not about just me. I'm just the shit stirrer to get everybody else talking, because all of you have just as important things to say as I do. And hopefully we can give you a platform to do that, like in these lives. I'm hoping to do more of these lives so that so we can get these questions. And I would tell the people on YouTube, if you listen to the podcast already, you know this, but if you don't know this. Anybody who listens to the podcast has the opportunity to be a guest on the show. All you have to do is send a email to rationalboomer@gmail.com and say, hey, Mike, I want to be on the Rational Boomer podcast. We'll work out a time. I send you a Zoom link, and there we go. And you know what? I have a lot of luck with bringing guests on. Almost every guest I've brought on has done a great job. And the important thing is, if you're nervous about that sort of thing, it's nothing really to be nervous about. You can ask anybody who's been on the show. It's more about a conversation than an interview or a show. We have a conversation about what we're thinking and what we're feeling, and people like to hear that. So if you want to be on the Rational Boomer podcast, send me that email, rationalboomer@gmail.com. Do you think she should pardon him for the country? From Tay Linton. Absolutely not. This is what they'll say: for the good of the country. So there is no divisiveness. We need to pardon Donald Trump. And I disagree wholeheartedly, not because I'm just vengeful toward Donald Trump, but I am. It's more than that. This is a much different situation than a Nixon or something like that. We've gone through so much shit. This country needs a closure. The accountability of Donald Trump. We need to know that he can be convicted and sentenced and be accountable for the shit he's done. People are angry about what he's gotten away with up to this point, and letting him off the hook one more time, that would cause more upheaval than sentencing him. So no, I don't think that's good for it at all. Old Soul says, I'm looking forward to November. It's going to be dancing in the streets. You're probably not too far from right with that, Old Soul. People are going to be excited. They're going to feel like this nightmare is finally over, and there probably will be dancing in the streets, no doubt about it. And I'm looking forward to it. I think we're going to have a whole different vibe in this country as opposed to the darkness and the clouds that we've been dealing with for what seems like 10 years. Um, there's going to be some sun peeking through. People are going to smile. They're going to have hope. They're going to look forward to tomorrow as opposed to what we do now. So I'm looking forward to that. Kelly Downing says, yes, it will at Old Soul. Remember, everyone, check your registration. If you live in Georgia, early voting starts October 15th. Yeah, I think it's vote.org. You can go to vote.org, put in your name and where you live, and they'll tell you if you're still registered. If you're not, then re register. The fact that you have to do this is absolute bullshit, but I would highly suggest that you do that. Old Soul says, Carolyn, I've already put in my PTO. I'm going to party hard. I will tell you, if you listen to the podcast, you get to know about Old Soul's family. And that's a family who parties together and has a good time. I may have to try to get down to Las Vegas to partake because it sounds like they have a really good time. And after the stories of all the people in her family, I want to meet some of those folks. Clifton Manley says, good day, mate. Australia is watching and laughing at the orange Hitler pig. I get it. I understand you're laughing. We laugh too, but it's really not that funny because of the danger it puts this country in. But I appreciate your concern and interest in it. Benny Loco says, you're totally one of my go-to places, Boomer. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. When I started doing this, it was just an old man sitting, talking with nothing special going on. I said, let the chips fall where they may. And I'm humbled by the fact of how many people actually watch and participate and listen and do this. And I'm extremely thankful to all you folks that do that. Old Soul says, everyone make sure to check your registration. Check it once a week. Absolutely. Continuing on. True Seeker says, I love your calm voice, even when you're shit talking is very level headed during the fear mongering season we find ourselves in. Well, True Seeker, I'll tell you what, it wasn't that long. Well, it was long ago when I was younger, man. I was like everybody else. I would get angry. I would maybe lose my shit. I might get nervous about things. But I eventually found out that when I did lose my shit, everything got worse. So, being the rational boomer that I am, I rationalized this out and I said, well, if that doesn't work well for me, maybe I should try to change it up. Then the question was, how do you change it up? I mean, you act the way you act. So I said, I'm going to force myself to stay calm in those situations, just see what happens. So I forced myself to stay calm in every situation. And it was hard. It was very hard, but I forced myself and I did it. And everything worked out better. So I was more motivated after that to continue to hold back and stop and think instead of just reacting. After a while, it becomes second nature and it's just the way you are. See, however you act right now, you've trained your mind to be that way. So theoretically, that means um, you should be able to change it again. And I think that's true. I think I have, and I think anybody can. Um, Benny Loco says, I may join you sometime, Boomer. Absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. Once I can figure out how to get people on with me on YouTube Lives, I will have folks on, no question. Renee Collins says, waiting for Walz and Vance debate. If you think Kamala kicked ass, wait for part 2 from Walz. Yeah, I agree. JD Vance is socially awkward, and Tim Walz is just the opposite. In many ways, because of his personality, I think JD or Tim Walz might be a better debater than Kamala. Don't get me wrong, Kamala is awesome. She's the perfect presidential candidate and debater. Tim Walz adds something more into it, the more the humor and more the down home type of thing. And that's not going to help JD Vance at all. Monica says voting blue is not an option as long as there is a Project 2025 is available in GOP. Don't know how crazy the next candidate is as long as there's a Heritage Foundation. I agree. That is something in the offing that you should be concerned about. Now, if we beat Donald Trump, the likelihood of Project 2025 coming through is almost zero. But as folks say, that doesn't mean they aren't going to still keep it around and still try to push it on us at some later date. Maybe someday when we're not as focused and not as aggressive, and they try to slip it in again. So we do have to be ready for that sort of thing. Kimberly says the worst punishment would be solitary confinement. He won't be able to tell his stories. Yeah, you put Donnie Trump in any jail cell, whether it's solitary confinement or not. You put him in for a week and it will drive him nuts. I don't even know that he would survive that. Perry says postponing the sentencing is actually the judge transmitting that Donald is getting jail time. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, if it was just going to be a slap on the hand and some minor thing, he would have just done it and got out of the way. He wants to sentence him to jail, and it poses more problems to him doing that as long as he's a presidential candidate. Now that the judge feels pretty comfortable that he's not going to be the president, he can put it off till after the election and fuck Donald Trump up. Registration deadline for Texas is October 7th. By all means, make sure you're registered in Texas. Uh, People are telling me, even Jace from Texas, who's on the podcast frequently, says there's a possibility that Texas could flip. And I will just tell you this: Florida and Texas have a possibility of flipping. We haven't heard that for a long time. If one of those states flip, Donald Trump literally has no chance to win. So those are important states. Um, John Nielsen says we're registered here and Minnesota doesn't allow anyone to F around with your status. You're absolutely right. I'm not worried about my registration. John is apparently a Minnesota homie along with me. Um, we're very lucky to be in this state. We are a blue state. Tim Walz was our governor. There's a lot of Republicans that don't like Tim Walz, but he's done an outstanding job in this state. I mean, what he's done in this state has been absolutely amazing. And I feel much safer in terms of my vote and just my life in this state because of Tim Walz. And he will be incredibly beneficial to the country. Obi Mom Kenobi, if you go to the polls and they say you aren't on the list, ask for a provisional ballot as is allowed by law. It can be cured later. Carolyn, that is true, Mike. He is a clear and present danger, no question. September 26th with Tanya Chutkin is going to get her going. There's actually two things going on that day, Perry. On September 26th, which isn't that far away, maybe 10, 11 days. First of all, there'll be the opening arguments for Donald Trump's appeal on the Letitia James lawsuit to the tune of $450 million. Remember how he delayed it, put up some bond? Well, now he's got his appeal. He delayed it as long as he can. The appeal is here. He will not win the appeal. And at some time in the not too distant future, he'll run out of appeals and he'll have to come up with $450 million. And he'll have as much luck doing that as Rudy Giuliani does, coming up with $148 million. Then they come in and start taking his shit. That's what's going to happen. So that happens that day. And then Tanya Chutkin is going to get a brief from Jack Smith regarding his superseding indictments. And the fun will begin, as Perry said, because there's going to be new evidence revealed in that briefing. You thought we knew everything. You thought, how could it get worse? But it will. And Donald Trump is fighting all he can to make sure that evidence doesn't get out before the election. Well, September 26th might be the start. Somebody said something about the October surprise. This may be part of the October surprise, so we'll see. Perry says, love this program, and I agree about the dulcet tones of your voice. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We got Will Rodriguez talking country music. Garth Brooks rules. You know what? I was a DJ in my younger life, and I did rock and stuff like that. But I also was a DJ for country music too, and I never really liked country music before that because I was young. After that, I learned to have an appreciation for it. Um, Walls has dealt with worse than JD in his classroom. Yeah, Walls has dealt with worse in the legislature in Minnesota. I'm not worried about Tim Walz. He's a warrior, but he's a happy warrior. He's a funny guy, but just listen to him talk. He's the kind of guy that will make you smile, then he'll rip your shit apart. He's fully capable of doing that. Um, Kimberly Soderman, yeah. Childcare policies like grandparents babysit. Yeah, when they were talking about how to lessen the cost of childcare, there were no policies, there were no strategies. Well, let grandma and grandpa babysit. Well, I tell you what, I'm a grandpa, and I'm in a fortunate position because I'm retired. So is my wife. And anytime my kids ask me to watch my grandkids, I'm fucking in. But not everybody has that luxury. Some grandparents are still working, they have their own things to do. The fact that J.D. Vance came up with that answer to save people money on childcare is a fucking insult to everybody that has children. I've had kids in daycare. That shit is expensive. It was hard back in the day. It's getting harder now. And it's important that we try to do all we can for the millennials and the Gen Zs. What people forget to realize is that the boomers and the Gen Xers are starting to move to the side. The majority of the people in this country will be millennials and Gen Z, so they're going to have to try to carry our economy. If these young people don't have any money or can't qualify for home loans, what happens to our economy? What happens to the value of we boomers' properties? A lot of people have homes, and that's part of their retirement. If there is nobody to buy it or they can't qualify to buy it, that takes your investment and cuts it in half. Benny Loco says JD talks but says nothing, just like his boss, just like every Republican, Benny. It's all of them. They all do that. Beth Gaines says, I found you on TikTok. I appreciate how you can ease the worry about the whole thing. My parents are Trumper boomers, and it's stressful. Well, Beth, I understand that. I have some members of my family that are Trump humpers too, and it's frustrating. I will tell you this: there is no value in arguing with them. There is no value at all. Uh, you could show them facts. You could have any kind of evidence you want, and they will never believe you. It's best not to even engage with them. Just avoid them if you can, because it's a no-win situation. Old soul, Tim got this. Vance was taken to task by Dana Bash. Tim is going to mop the floor with him. I would agree. um, Hold on a second. Kelly Downing says, keep doing the Not a Podcast. I don't get over to TikTok and I love the consolidated format. Yeah, for those of you that don't know, the TikToks that I do on TikTok also show up here on YouTube. But I also do something that was a suggestion by a listener. I take all the TikToks for a day in audio form, not video, just audio, put them all together, and they run on Spotify, where the Rational Boomer podcast, the audio podcast, runs. So if you don't have time to hear the TikToks or can't take the time to watch them on YouTube, go to Spotify. You get them all set back to back, and you can get them that way. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kelly. Minnesota is civilized, unlike Georgia. Well, yeah, Minnesota is civilized. We have our issues too. We have our pocket of Trump-the-fucks. I can name you a couple of cities, suburbs that are heavy red. Um, my wife and I happen to have uh, a little condo in Savannah, Georgia. And I will tell you, that's an absolutely wonderful place. People are nice. It's a very blue area of Georgia. There are many areas in Georgia that are blue. So while they have a lot of problems, especially in their Republican legislature, there are parts of Georgia that are very nice. True Sacred Texas going to blue is my goal. Sending my Texas postcards soon. Well, thank you for that. Beth says, I live in Oregon and I never felt like my vote mattered. It's decided by the time our votes get counted. Yeah, I get that. I get that. But that's not been the case with Donald Trump and some other situations where they're fighting about it the next couple of days. Whether your vote ultimately matters or not, you got to do what you can do. I mean, I've said that too. People, when I started doing TikToks and the podcast, they say, "What good do you think you're going to do?" I mean, how is one guy going to fix everything? And I'm not. At some point, when you have problems in front of you, you got to do everything you can do, and whether it helps or not makes no difference. It's at least you did something. So even if you think your vote doesn't count, it does, and do it. It's a small price to pay. Taking time to vote is a small effort compared to what we have to deal with day to day. And think of it this way, Beth. Even if Kamala has already won by the time you get to vote, if that's already the case, and that might very well be the case, think about it this way. Isn't there some value in kicking Donald Trump's ass worse? Don't you want to be part of that? Um, KGO says, I truly believe Florida can flip. The Villages hosted Doug Emhoff this weekend, and he gave a great speech, followed by a golf cart caravan for Harris Walls. Yeah, I was really surprised to see that. I thought everything at the Villages was Republican, was Donald Trump, but that's not the case. It was pretty impressive what we're seeing from Florida. And I think part of the problem is that Ron DeSantis, the governor, is an absolute failure. Things in Florida aren't great, from insurance prices to workers. Everything is kind of going south down there because this wannabe fascist, Ron DeSantis, is running Florida into the ground. And that's sad because Florida is quite a beautiful place. I always enjoyed going to Florida. I don't know that I'd go there now until they figure some things out. But I'm sure people are feeling the pinch. I mean, when you can't afford insurance for your house and you have to worry about hurricanes and flooding and that sort of thing, that's going to piss you off a little bit. Or when you take away the right to abortion in Florida, which they have done, 6 weeks is the limit. That's essentially an abolition, or actually abolished um, abortion in Florida. I've said all along the biggest issue going into this election, over and above all the crazy bullshit that's going on, is Roe v. Wade. We know that by overturning Roe v. Wade and making abortion legal in any given state, he's essentially taking the constitutional right away from 50% of this country, that being women. But we also know that 75% of the people in this country support Roe v. Wade. So they're going to be pissed. I mean, somebody like me who's old, my wife and I are old, we're not having any more kids. The abortion issue won't affect us directly, but I have kids and I have grandkids, and I want to make sure that they are kept safe. When I'm long gone, I don't want them to have to deal with some of the crazy, ridiculous, dangerous bullshit that some of these states are putting on people in this country. And if you ever have questions about what's going on and how bad it is, Old Soul is the person to ask. If you don't want to ask her, just listen to the Rational Boomer podcast, and every week you'll hear some stories that will make you very angry. Um, let's see here. I'm going to have to find that video. That sounds exciting. Old Soul. Benny Loco says, my mom was a country and Western singer. I had to listen to it. Anybody we know, Benny Loco? A local one or a international superstar? We are ending 40 years of Reaganomics. Yeah. That's one of my greatest embarrassments. In 1980, I was 20 years old. I didn't know fuck all about fuck all. The economy was in shambles. Gas prices were going through the roof. There were gas lines. It was a crazy time. As much as we loved Jimmy Carter, things weren't going well and we needed a change. So when I voted for my first president, I voted for Ronald Reagan. That just seemed like the thing to do. In retrospect, that's probably one of the bigger mistakes I've made because where we are today started out with Ronald Reagan, especially with the Reaganomics and the trickle down theory and all that stuff. But it's gone on and on and on and on again. Even though it continues to fail, they keep shoving it down our throats. And for whatever reason, we accept it. Well, we're not accepting it anymore. That's not a thing anymore. It's not going to happen anymore. Trickle down theory doesn't work, will never work, never has worked. Um, Jay Fritz says in Florida, lots of folks live on small Social Security checks, and because it's so expensive here, have to go back to work. Yeah, that may be why Florida is looking to go blue too, because there are a lot of folks down there on Social Security checks. And because they're on Social Security checks, and because um, the Republicans want to do away with Social Security, they see in their future fucking homelessness. That's a good enough reason to turn it blue. Uh, let's see here. Remember that Reaganomics killed manufacturing jobs and the middle class. Absolutely, it did. And thank you to Joe Biden for bringing back manufacturing. We still have a ways to go, and we'll get it back. But we need somebody like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris leading us because Donald Trump will not be of help to us. Manufacturing not will not improve. Benny Loco says, I fled Florida for California. It's too crazy for me there at this time, paying rent in Cali, and I own my home in Florida. Now I have squatters. Oh, good Lord. Sorry to hear that, Benny. I've read stories about um, squatters and how difficult it is to deal with it. You have my sympathy. True Seeker at Beth, I cut off my red hat family years ago when I almost died of a miscarriage and had a DNC to save my life. They thought I had an abortion and judged me harshly. Good riddance. Yeah, those aren't the kind of people you need in your life. Those people that don't give a fuck about your safety, just do away with them. It's a sad thing you have to do, but it's really the only thing you can possibly do. Uh, Corporations are buying property here and is ruined trying to buy a home for a lot of people. Yeah, absolutely. That's something we have to address. And keep in mind, if the Republicans are in, they aren't going to fix that situation. Kamala Harris is aware of the housing situation. And frankly, that's one of the things that bother me the most. I've talked to a lot of young people. They have jobs. They don't get paid well because we don't have a good salary structure for jobs these days. But they don't make enough to even for rent in some cases. Well, that's not sustainable. That has to be fixed. Um, Mike Hunt, is that a real name or are you just trying to play me here? Liked and subbed. Thanks for your voice. Thank you. DeSantis is challenging signatures on the amendment re-abortion. I'm tired of him. And Rick Scott is also on borrowed time in his Senate seat. Yeah, I think Rick Scott's in trouble. I mean, you keep in mind Rick Scott is the biggest Trump humper of all time. You keep in mind that the FBI confiscated his phone for the January 6th situation. There's probably some things going to come out about Rick Scott that he's not going to like. Um, Kim Albers, I just couldn't force myself to vote for Reagan. Well, good for you, Kim. I wish I'd been that strong, but I have to admit I was dumb as fuck when I did that. But I was 20, rarely sober, and I was at a point in my life. I make this point about young men, and when they're in their 20s, young men typically have more testosterone than they have intellectual capabilities, and that was certainly the case with me back then. Um, What else here? Some of us are better off with a family of our own choosing. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's unfortunate when we lose members of our family, but it's better than having them around and living in the turmoil that they will bring. Kelly Downing says, I barely get from paycheck to paycheck working full time and making 22 an hour. Absolutely. I can relate to that. Um, People should be making more money. And I don't know what the qualm is with people making more money. Well, everything will go up in price. Well, maybe that's the case and maybe not. But here's the thing. If income goes up, they pay more taxes. If income goes up, these people can buy more products. So while it may be a tighter profit margin for the company that's employing you, they're likely to sell more because you'll be in a position to actually buy the shit they're selling. Kimberly says, I talked to a couple from Canada and they said that their prices are much higher than ours. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the important thing to remember. This inflation thing wasn't just a United States thing, it was worldwide. And in fact, the United States has brought down inflation lower than most every country in the world. There is a MAGA troll in Trucker John's live stream with his handle, so I took it to mess with him. Now I'm stuck with it for another week. Cool. I gotcha. I gotcha. I get it, man. I saw the movie. We're almost getting to the point where I'm going to have to wrap things up here because I'm old. And Jay Frisch says immigrants paid over 258 billion in federal income tax last year. That's more than the wealthy paid probably because they don't pay any fucking taxes. Um, no, actually, I'm going to wrap things up here. I appreciate you coming out on YouTube for this live. This is the first one I've done in a while. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I've had a great time. I'm going to come to YouTube with lives more often. It's much easier to deal with than TikTok in a lot of ways because it's just fucking nuts out there sometimes. And YouTube, we get a chance to interact and talk about the things we need to talk about. So you guys have a good night. If you missed, uh, wait a minute here, I got to read this. The wrap up. Good timing as my Syrian American wife was prepared a great Arab meal for us. Sounds good. Bon appetit. Anyway, if you didn't get all of the live, this live will be the Rational Boomer podcast, and you can get it on Spotify or here on YouTube. So be sure to check it out. I want to thank you for joining me. I'll be back with a live again sometime soon. And of course, all the other stuff will be here every day. So you have a great night. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. All right. Now we wrapped up the YouTube live. Much different than the TikTok live. You know, it's much busier with TikTok because there's so many people and I miss a lot of questions. I don't think I missed many questions here, but I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we did it. It made doing this podcast on this Sunday night going into Monday a little bit easier. And hopefully you got something out of it too. So I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day and we will talk to you again soon.